The sun broke over Fort Bragg like a promise nobody asked for. Golden light spilled across the marksmanship complex, throwing long shadows over empty firing lanes. The air hung thick with morning dew and the ghost scent of cordite from yesterday's drills. Somewhere in the distance, a flag snapped against its pole. Sharp. Clean. The only sound that mattered before the range came alive. Lieutenant Kira Ashford walked the gravel path alone. Her boots crunched with measured rhythm. Not hurried, not hesitant, just steady. The kind of walk that came from knowing exactly where you were going and not caring who noticed. She wore the standard Army combat uniform, sleeves rolled down despite the Carolina heat already building. Her dark hair pulled back tight. No makeup, no jewelry, nothing that spoke of vanity or weakness or the need to be seen. She carried a notepad under one arm, a pen clipped to her pocket, the uniform of a forward observer. The woman they called when coordinates needed checking, when fire missions needed calculating, when someone had to sit in an office and make sure the numbers added up so the rounds landed where they were supposed to. Nobody called her when they wanted a shooter. The range stretched out before her like a challenge written in dirt and steel. Target stands dotted the landscape at intervals. 300 yards, 600, 1,000. Further still where the earth curved and heat made the air shimmer like water. Where only the best could reach. Where legends were born or buried depending on what happened when the trigger broke. Kira stopped at the edge of the active lanes. A dozen soldiers clustered near the equipment shed. All men, all infantry, all carrying themselves with the particular swagger that came from knowing they belonged here. They checked weapons, adjusted slings, talked in the shorthand of people who had earned their place through sweat and brass, in the kind of repetition that made muscle memory feel like prophecy. None of them looked at her. She was furniture, background. The lieutenant who signed range cards and tracked ammunition counts. Useful in the way a stapler was useful. Nothing more. Kira watched them work. Her eyes moved with the kind of stillness that most people never learned, following the trajectory of a barrel as it swept across the horizon, noting the way a young specialist gripped his rifle too tight, how a sergeant's breathing climbed too high in his chest before he fired. Small things, details that separated competence from excellence, errors that got people killed when the stakes were real and the enemy wasn't made of paper and paint. She said nothing. In the shadow of the control tower, Master Sergeant Dalton Cross stood with his arms folded across his chest. 57 years old and built like a man who had spent 4 decades refusing to quit. His face was weathered leather, lines carved deep around his eyes from squinting into sun and scope, gray threading through hair that had once been black as gun oil. He wore the same uniform as everyone else but carried it differently, with the weight of someone who had earned every thread. Cross watched Kira watching the shooters. His jaw worked slightly. A tell. Something he did when his mind was turning over problems he hadn't solved yet. He had noticed Lieutenant Ashford before. Noticed how she always arrived early. How she drifted toward the firing line when she thought nobody was paying attention. How her gaze tracked movement with the precision of someone who understood what they were seeing. He noticed other things too. The way she sometimes touched her left forearm through the fabric of her sleeve. A habit. Unconscious. Like checking for something that needed to remain hidden. The way she stood with her weight distributed perfectly even. No leaning, no shifting. The posture of someone who knew how to be still for a very long time. Cross had seen that stillness before. In places where stillness meant survival. In men who had learned to breathe shallow and think deep and wait for the perfect moment that might never come. In shooters who understood that patience was the most dangerous weapon in the arsenal. But he said nothing. A voice cut through the morning air like a saw through soft wood. All right, people, lanes are hot in 10 minutes. If you're not checked in, you're not shooting. Sergeant First Class Rex Holloway strode into view. 38 years old, broad through the shoulders, carrying authority like a shield he polished every morning. His voice had that particular bark that came from years of making soldiers jump when he spoke. Not cruel, just certain. The voice of a man who knew the rules and enforced them without apology. Holloway had been a sniper instructor for 6 years. Before that, 3 combat tours. Iraq twice, Afghanistan once. He had put rounds on target when it mattered. Had watched good men die because someone hesitated or miscalculated or thought they were ready when they weren't. Those memories lived behind his eyes like permanent residents. They made him careful, made him hard, made him the kind of instructor who would rather turn away 10 qualified soldiers than let through one who might get someone killed. He spotted Kira standing at the edge of the lane. His expression shifted, not hostile, just weary, like a teacher who had already graded this test 1,000 times and knew the answer before the question was asked. Lieutenant Ashford, his tone carried that careful balance between respect for rank and doubt about capability. Can I help you with something? Kira turned to face him. She stood perfectly still, hands at her sides, not defensive, not aggressive, just present. When she spoke, her voice carried clear across the gravel without rising in volume. Sergeant Holloway, I'm requesting permission to attempt the sniper qualification lane. Silence dropped like a curtain. The soldiers near the equipment shed stopped talking, stopped moving. The kind of sudden quiet that happens when something unexpected crashes into routine. Heads turned, eyes found Kira, then found each other. Eyebrows raised, grins started to form at the corners of mouths. Holloway's jaw tightened. He took 3 steps closer, close enough that most people would feel crowded, close enough to make it personal. His voice dropped lower, not quite a whisper, but meant for her ears primarily. Ma'am, with all due respect, the sniper course isn't something we run on request. It requires pre-qualification, physical standards, mental evaluation. It's not a hobby. I understand that, Sergeant. Do you? He tilted his head slightly. Because what I see is a forward observer who handles paperwork, coordinates, calculations, important work, necessary work, but not the same as putting your eye behind glass and making a call that might end someone's life. Kira didn't blink. I'm not asking for the full course, Sergeant. Just one lane. One chance to show I understand the fundamentals. A laugh erupted from the cluster of soldiers. Quick, nervous. The kind of laugh that spreads like a virus when everyone wants to be in on the joke, but nobody wants to be the first to commit to it. Corporal Finn Beckett stepped forward. 24 years old, fresh-faced, the kind of young soldier who still thought swagger could substitute for experience. He wore his confidence like cologne. Too much. Obvious from 20 feet away. Sergeant Holloway, sir. Beckett's voice carried that particular tone of someone performing for an audience. Maybe the lieutenant wants to add tried sniper qualification to her OER. You know, pad the resume. More laughter, louder this time, emboldened. Another soldier chimed in. Bet she doesn't even know what MOA stands for. Does she think this is like the M4 qual pop-up targets at 50 meters? The comments floated across the range like smoke, not vicious, not yet. Just the casual dismissal of men who had never been given a reason to question their assumptions, who saw a woman asking to do something traditionally male and felt the need to protect that tradition through mockery rather than consideration. Kira stood motionless. She didn't flush, didn't clench her fists, didn't give them the reaction they were fishing for. Her face remained composed, almost serene, like someone standing in rain and choosing not to acknowledge the water. That stillness was more unsettling than anger would have been. Holloway raised one hand. The laughter died immediately. Enough! His voice carried command. Then he turned back to Kira. His expression softened marginally. Not kind, but not cruel either. Just tired. Lieutenant, I'm not trying to embarrass you, but sniper work is specialized. It takes years to develop. Most men who try don't make it. It's not personal. It's just reality. I understand reality, Sergeant. Then you understand why I can't just let anyone step up to the lane because they're curious. Kira's eyes held his. I'm not curious, Sergeant Holloway. I'm qualified. Something in her voice made Holloway pause. Not the words themselves, but the way she said them. With the quiet certainty of someone stating a fact rather than making a claim. The same way a pilot might say, I can fly, or a surgeon might say, I can operate. Not bragging, not hoping, just knowing. Holloway studied her face. Behind him, Cross shifted his weight. The movement drew Holloway's attention. Their eyes met. Cross gave the smallest nod, not approval exactly, more like permission to see where this went. Holloway trusted Cross more than he trusted his own instincts sometimes. The master sergeant had been doing this since Holloway was in high school. If Cross wanted to see something, there was probably something worth seeing. Holloway exhaled slowly. One lane, he pointed toward the nearest shooting position. 300 yards, standard marksmanship fundamentals. You get 3 shots, miss all 3, and this conversation is over. Understood? Understood. And Lieutenant, he stepped closer again, voice dropping. If you waste my cadre's time, if you treat this like some kind of publicity stunt, you will make enemies in this unit faster than you can imagine. We take this seriously. We take it personally. Clear. Crystal Sergeant. Holloway stepped back. He gestured toward the lane with one hand, an invitation that felt more like a dare. The other soldiers drifted closer. Not openly mocking now, but curious, the way people gather around a car accident, compelled by the possibility of witnessing something go wrong. Kira walked to the shooting bench. Her boots made soft sounds on the rubber mat. Everything else faded. The murmurs, the heat, the weight of eyes on her back. She was aware of it all, but affected by none of it, like someone who had learned to exist in 2 places at once, present in body, absent in spirit. The way you had to be when the job required absolute focus and the world kept trying to distract you. The rifle waited on the bench. A standard M110 SAS, semi-automatic sniper system, familiar weight, familiar lines. She had fired this platform before, though nobody here knew that. Had fired it until her shoulder bruised and her fingers cramped, and the recoil became just another heartbeat. But that was another life, another version of herself that these men would never meet unless she chose to introduce them. Kira placed her hand on the rifle. The metal was cool despite the rising heat. She checked the chamber. Clear. Checked the magazine. Loaded, 5 rounds, more than enough for 3 shots. She settled into position behind the weapon. Not slowly, not quickly, just with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this thousands of times. Her elbows found their place on the bench, her cheek pressed against the stock. Her right hand curled around the grip. Her left hand supported the forend. Every point of contact deliberate, purposeful, creating a stable platform that wouldn't waver when the shot broke. Behind her, Corporal Beckett whispered to another soldier, "Look at her position. That's not bad, actually. Probably took a basic marksmanship class somewhere." "Yeah, book learning. Different when the target's at 300. Kira closed her eyes, just for a moment, just long enough to feel the world around her, the way her father had taught her 30 years ago on a ridge in Montana. When she was 8 years old and the rifle was bigger than she was, and he had put his hand on her shoulder and said the words she still heard in quiet moments. "You don't fight the wind, Kira. You listen to it. You don't force the shot. You wait for it to come to you." She opened her eyes. Through the scope, the target materialized, a silhouette at 300 yards, man-shaped, painted white against the brown backstop. The distance collapsed through the magnification. What had been far became near. What had been impossible became achievable. Her finger moved to the trigger, not touching yet, just hovering, feeling the weight of the mechanism, the resistance, the break point where pressure became action. She had learned this trigger in another time, another place, but triggers were like old friends. You never really forgot them. She took a breath, held it halfway, felt her heartbeat, counted. 1, 2, 3. Between the beats, in the space where the body pauses, where everything stills, that's where the shot lives. The rifle barked, the sound cracked across the range, sharp, definitive, echoing off the control tower and rolling into the tree line beyond. Kira absorbed the recoil, smooth, let the rifle settle back into position. Her eye never left the scope. Downrange dirt kicked up 6 inches to the left of the target. A miss. The whispers started immediately. "Told you. Not even close. Waste of time." Holloway shook his head, not with satisfaction, just with the resignation of a man who had predicted this outcome and found no joy in being correct. He started to speak, started to call time and end this before it became more embarrassing for everyone involved. But Kira moved first. Her hand went to the elevation knob on the scope, clicked it twice. Windage adjustment. 1 click right. Her body shifted infinitesimally. Left elbow drew back half an inch. Right shoulder rolled forward a fraction. Micro adjustments that most shooters took minutes to calculate. She made them in seconds. Cross leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. Those weren't the movements of someone guessing. Those were the corrections of someone who knew exactly what had gone wrong and exactly how to fix it. He had seen shooters make those kinds of adjustments before. Veterans, professionals, people who had burned through enough ammunition to understand the language bullets spoke when they missed. Kira settled behind the rifle again. Same process, same ritual. Breath in, breath out, halfway hold, heartbeat, wait for the space between. The rifle fired. This time the round struck closer, still not center mass, but hitting the outer edge of the silhouette. High right shoulder, a wound that would stop a man. Maybe not kill him immediately, but stop him. Make him think twice, give you the seconds you needed. The whispers changed tenor, less mocking now, more uncertain. One shot was luck. Two shots was pattern, and the second shot was significantly better than the first. That meant something. It meant whoever was behind that rifle was learning, adapting, processing information and making corrections in real time. That was dangerous. That was what separated hobbyists from professionals. Kira adjusted again. Quarter turn on the elevation. Her breathing slowed even further. Her body seemed to sink into the bench, becoming part of the platform rather than separate from it. The rifle was no longer a tool she was using. It was an extension of her intention. Her will made physical, her purpose given steel and glass and powder. Holloway watched with his arms crossed. He wanted to call it, wanted to end this before it went somewhere he couldn't control. But something stopped him. Maybe it was Cross's interest. Maybe it was his own curiosity. Or maybe it was something in the way Kira held herself, with a calm that didn't match someone struggling, with a focus that looked more like remembering than discovering. Third shot. The rifle spoke its truth. Downrange the round punched through the center of the target, dead center mass. The kind of hit that made paper arguments obsolete. The kind of accuracy that couldn't be explained away as accident or fortune. That was skill. That was training. That was someone who knew exactly what they were doing and had simply needed 2 attempts to calibrate to an unfamiliar weapon. Total silence, not the anticipatory silence from before. This was different, heavier. The silence of men recalculating assumptions they hadn't realized they were making. The silence of watching something that shouldn't be possible become real right in front of you. Kira rose from the rifle, slowly, gracefully, like someone finishing a conversation rather than ending a test. She stepped back from the bench, brushed invisible dust from her sleeves. Her face remained neutral. No smile, no smugness. No indication that she had just done something remarkable. She simply stood there, waiting, patient as stone. Holloway stared at the target, at the grouping. 2 hits, 1 perfect. From 300 yards. With a rifle she had presumably never fired before. Under pressure, with an audience that had made their skepticism abundantly clear. Those conditions broke most people, made their hands shake, made them rush, made them fail in exactly the ways everyone expected them to fail. She hadn't failed. Beginner's luck. Corporal Beckett's voice carried less confidence than before, like he was trying to convince himself as much as anyone else. 300 yards isn't that hard. Anyone can get lucky at 300. But nobody laughed this time. Cross stepped forward. His boots crunched on the gravel, each step deliberate, drawing every eye. He moved past Holloway without a word, moved past the cluster of soldiers who parted for him like water around a stone. He stopped 3 feet from Kira, close enough to speak quietly, close enough that his words would be for her first and everyone else second. Lieutenant Ashford, Master Sergeant Cross. Their eyes met. In that moment, something passed between them. Not words, not even understanding, just recognition. The way 2 people who have been to the same places can identify each other without needing to compare travel itineraries. Cross had spent enough time in the dark places of the world to know what they did to people, how they marked you, changed you, left traces that never quite washed away no matter how hard you scrubbed. He saw those traces in Kira's eyes. Your fundamentals are solid, Cross said. His voice was graveled honey, rough but not unkind. Breathing is controlled, position is textbook. Corrections were immediate and accurate. Thank you, Master Sergeant. That's not a compliment, Lieutenant. That's an observation. He tilted his head slightly. The question is where you learned fundamentals that clean. Forward observers don't typically develop that level of marksmanship proficiency. Kira said nothing, just held his gaze. Steady, unflinching, not defiant, not evasive, just present, like someone who had made a choice to keep certain doors closed and intended to honor that choice regardless of who knocked. Cross glanced at her left forearm. For just a moment, just long enough to notice something. A slight irregularity in how the fabric hung, like something underneath created a subtle distortion. Like ink under skin. But he didn't mention it, didn't press, just filed it away in the part of his mind where he kept things that didn't add up yet, but might later. Sergeant Holloway, Cross spoke without turning. I think the lieutenant should try 600 yards. A ripple of reaction. Holloway stepped forward. Master Sergeant, with respect, 600 is a different animal. Wind becomes a real factor. Drop compensation requires actual calculation. I'm not sure. I am. Cross's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. 600 yards. Let's see if that was luck or skill. Holloway's mouth tightened, but he nodded. You didn't argue with Cross, not in public, not about shooter evaluation. The man had forgotten more about long-range marksmanship than most instructors would ever learn. If he wanted to see something, there was a reason. Kira walked to the 600-yard lane. The soldiers followed, a migration of curiosity and disbelief. They clustered at the observation point, whispers flowing between them like electricity, speculating, theorizing, trying to reconcile what they had seen with what they believed should be possible. The new target seemed impossibly small. Even through the scope, 600 yards compressed perspective, made accuracy feel theoretical rather than achievable. Wind mattered here, temperature, humidity, 1,000 invisible variables that could turn a perfect shot into a miss by inches. Kira didn't ask for wind reading, didn't ask for range card data, didn't ask for anything. She simply stood beside the bench, eyes closed, face turned slightly into the breeze that ghosted across the range. Her hair stirred at the edges, her sleeves rippled. She stood there for 15 seconds, 20, just feeling, just listening, just remembering what her father had taught her about reading what couldn't be seen. Cross watched her, his expression unreadable, but his posture had changed, shifted. The way a man stands when he's watching something that matters, when casual observation becomes focused study. He had seen this before, this ritual, this moment of connection between shooter and environment. He had seen it in the best long gunners he had ever worked with, the ones who understood that technology was useful but instinct was irreplaceable. Kira opened her eyes. She moved into position, smooth as water finding level. Her body settled behind the rifle. Her breathing slowed, deepened, became the rhythm that everything else synchronized to, in the silence between breaths, between heartbeats, between the moments when the earth seemed to pause. That's where she lived. The first shot surprised no one this time. It hit, not perfect, but solid. Upper torso, a kill shot by any standard that mattered. The kind of hit that said this wasn't accident. This was competence. This was someone who understood the fundamentals and could execute them under observation. But Kira made another adjustment, smaller this time, more subtle, like she was having a conversation with the rifle, learning its particular dialect. Every weapon spoke slightly different, had its own preferences, its own quirks. Good shooters learn to listen. Great shooters learn to adapt. Second shot, center mass, perfect, from 600 yards, with wind, on a rifle she had picked up 20 minutes ago. The silence this time felt different, not shock anymore, something deeper, something that bordered on unease, because excellence at this level didn't happen by chance, didn't happen through casual practice. This kind of skill required dedication, required thousands of rounds, required someone who had spent serious time behind serious glass doing serious work. And nobody here knew when Lieutenant Kira Ashford had done that. Nobody knew where, nobody knew why. She stood up from the rifle. As she did, her right hand went to her left forearm, just for a moment, just a touch, a reassurance, or maybe a reminder. Her fingers pressed against the fabric of her sleeve, against whatever lay beneath. The gesture was unconscious, habitual, the kind of thing people did when they were checking that something important was still there. Cross saw it, saw her hand move, saw where it landed, saw the way the fabric pulled slightly. And in that pulling, in that momentary tension, he caught a glimpse of something, a shape, dark against skin, not much, just a fragment, but enough. Enough to recognize it for what it was. A tattoo. Not a decorative piece, not some youthful rebellion inked during a wild weekend. This was something else. Something that looked purposeful, intentional, like a record rather than an accessory, like something that meant something to someone. Cross's jaw tightened. His mind started working, turning over possibilities, filing through memories, comparing what he was seeing now with things he had seen before, in other places, on other people. People who wore their history on their skin because carrying it inside wasn't enough. But he said nothing, just watched as Kira walked away from the bench, as the soldiers stared at her with new eyes, as Holloway stood frozen between professional assessment and personal confusion. As the morning sun climbed higher and the heat pressed down and the world kept turning, despite everything that had just shifted, Corporal Beckett approached Holloway. "Sergeant, I don't understand. How did she—" "I don't know, Corporal." Holloway's voice was quiet, thoughtful. The mockery was gone now, replaced with something that might have been respect, might have been wariness. Hard to tell. "But I intend to find out." Cross moved to stand beside Kira, close enough to speak privately, far enough to maintain proper military courtesy. When he spoke, his voice carried no accusation, no challenge, just simple curiosity from one professional to another. "Lieutenant, I have one question. Master Sergeant, that tattoo on your arm." He paused, let the words hang. "What is it?" Kira's hand moved instinctively to her forearm, covering it, protecting it, her fingers pressed against the sleeve, against the secret beneath. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered across her face. Not fear, not shame, something closer to calculation. The weighing of options, the measuring of consequences. Then it was gone, replaced by that same calm mask she had worn all morning. "Just ink, Master Sergeant. Nothing that affects my ability to shoot." "I didn't ask if it affected your shooting." Cross held her gaze. "I asked what it is. And I told you." They stood there, two people locked in a conversation that had nothing to do with the words being spoken. Everything important happening in the silence, in the subtext, in what wasn't being said, because saying it would make it real, and real meant consequences neither of them were ready to face yet. Finally, Cross nodded. "Fair enough, Lieutenant." He stepped back, professional distance restored. "For what it's worth, those were good shots, very good shots. Sergeant Holloway will include them in his evaluation." "Thank you, Master Sergeant." "Don't thank me yet." He turned to go, then pause, look back. "One more thing. That last correction you made, at 600, the windage adjustment, that was textbook. Perfect even. The kind of correction that takes most shooters years to learn by feel." Kira said nothing. "Most shooters learn it through repetition," Cross continued, "through burning thousands of rounds, through muscle memory built over seasons, through experience that can't be rushed or faked or borrowed." "Is there a question, Master Sergeant?" "No, Lieutenant." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite approval, something in between. "Just an observation. Like I said." He walked away, left her standing there alone while the sun climbed higher and the morning stretched into afternoon, and somewhere behind closed doors, decisions were being made that would change everything. But for now, for this moment, Kira Ashford stood on the gravel of Fort Bragg's marksmanship range and felt the weight of secrets that refused to stay buried. She looked down at her left forearm, at the sleeve that covered what nobody here was supposed to see, what she had promised herself would remain hidden, a promise she had kept for 6 years. through transfers and deployments and a dozen opportunities to reveal the truth. She had kept it hidden because some things were too heavy to share. Some things changed how people looked at you. Some things turned you from a person into a story. And stories belong to everyone, but the person belonged only to themselves. She thought about Montana, about her father standing on that ridge with his hand on her shoulder, about the lessons he had taught her before cancer took him when she was 19, about the last thing he had said to her in that hospital room when his voice was already fading and his eyes already seeing something beyond what was visible. Whatever you become, Kira, be it completely, but never forget where you came from. Never forget who taught you, because we don't just pass down skills, we pass down responsibility. We pass down the duty to use those skills for something that matters. She had carried those words into places her father could never have imagined, into valleys where the air smelled like dust and fear, into nights that stretched forever while she watched through glass and waited for the moment when her presence would matter, when her training would mean the difference between someone living or dying, when the skills her father had given her would justify the weight she had carried them through. And when those moments came, she had been ready, had made the shots that needed making, had saved the people who needed saving, had done it all in silence, in shadow, in the kind of obscurity that let her sleep at night because nobody would ever know what she had done or why it mattered or how many names were still breathing because of bullets she had sent across impossible distances. But secrets were like water. They found the cracks. They seeped through. They pooled where you didn't expect them. And eventually someone noticed. Kira walked toward the admin building, away from the range, away from the soldiers still processing what they had witnessed, away from Cross and his questions that weren't really questions, away from Holloway and his confusion that wasn't really confusion, just away, into the familiar routine of paperwork and coordinates and the small safe role she had carved out for herself. But as she walked, she felt it, that old familiar weight settling back onto her shoulders, the weight of being seen, of being suspected, of standing at the edge of revelation and knowing that once you stepped off, there was no climbing back up, no returning to invisible, no going back to being just Lieutenant Ashford, who checked numbers and signed forms and never caused problems. Behind her on the range, Cross stood talking to Holloway, their voices low, their expressions serious, making decisions, drawing conclusions, connecting dots that Kira had worked very hard to keep separate, because both of them had been in the game long enough to recognize when something didn't fit, when the official story didn't match the visible evidence, when a forward observer shot like someone with combat experience they weren't supposed to have. And tomorrow they would start asking questions. Tomorrow the dots would connect faster. Tomorrow General Winston Graves would hear about the lieutenant who showed up unannounced and put rounds on target like she had been doing it professionally for years. Tomorrow everything would start to unravel, but today Kira Ashford walked back to her office, sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and tried to convince herself that she could keep the secret just a little while longer, even though she knew, deep down in the place where truth lived, regardless of convenience. She knew the silence was ending, the storm was coming, and when it arrived, there would be no hiding from what she had been, from what she was, from what that tattoo on her arm meant to the people who knew how to read it, the numbers etched in her skin. 1-142, 1-247, 983, 1-356. 4 numbers, 4 distances, 4 moments when death had whispered across impossible space and touched exactly who it was meant to touch. 4 reasons why Lieutenant Kira Ashford could put rounds on target with the kind of precision that made professional instructors go quiet. 4 secrets, still waiting, still patient, still inevitable. Morning turned to afternoon like a clock nobody was watching. The sun reached its apex and hung there, pressing heat down onto Fort Bragg with the weight of inevitability. But on the range, nobody noticed the temperature. Nobody thought about the sweat gathering at collars or the way boots stuck to rubber mats. They were thinking about Lieutenant Kira Ashford, about what they had seen, about what it meant. Word spread the way it always did in military units, through whispers and text messages and quick conversations in hallways. By lunch, half the base had heard some version of the story. A forward observer, a woman, 600 yards, perfect shots, the details mutated as they traveled. got bigger, got smaller, got stranger, but the core remained the same. Someone nobody expected had done something they shouldn't have been able to do, and now people were curious. Kira spent the afternoon in her office, door closed, blinds drawn, working through fire mission calculations that didn't need immediate attention, but gave her something to focus on besides the knot forming in her chest. The numbers on her screen blurred, refocused, blurred again. She kept seeing the range, kept feeling eyes on her back, kept touching her left forearm through the fabric. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. Report to range control at 0700 tomorrow. General Graves will be present. Mandatory attendance. She read it 3 times, set the phone down, picked it up again. General Winston Graves didn't attend basic qualification exercises, didn't involve himself in routine training. He was a busy man running a busy installation with bigger concerns than one lieutenant hitting targets at medium range. His presence meant something, meant someone had briefed him, meant someone had said something that made him interested, meant the secret was already leaking. Kira closed her laptop, leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes, and let herself remember. Afghanistan, 6 years ago, when she was 23 and stupid enough to think she was invincible, when the CIA had recruited her out of a private military contractor role because someone had noticed she could shoot better than the men they were paying triple her salary, when they had given her a code name and a mission and sent her to places that didn't officially exist to do work that would never be acknowledged. Ghost. They called her Ghost because she appeared when needed and vanished when done, because targets dropped without anyone seeing where the shots came from, because she operated alone in positions so remote that extraction wasn't guaranteed and survival was optional and success was the only metric that mattered. She had been good at it, better than good. She had been exceptional, and that exceptionalism had saved lives, American lives, people with families and futures and reasons to make it home. She had protected them through scopes from distances they couldn't imagine, had seen them pinned down, surrounded, outgunned, had seen the moments before someone was about to die. And she had intervened with math and patience and bullets that flew true. 4 major operations, 4 times when her presence made the difference, 4 distances she would never forget. She opened her eyes. The office felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in, like the past was pressing through the front and demanding to be acknowledged. She had spent 6 years building this new life, this quiet life, this life where she was just another officer doing her job and going home and pretending that the person she used to be was someone else entirely. But pretending only worked until someone looked close enough to see through it. The next morning arrived cold, not weather cold. Carolina in September was still warm enough to make you sweat, but cold in the way tension made everything feel. The kind of cold that came from knowing something important was about to happen and having no control over the outcome. Kira walked to range control at 0645. Early, always early, old habits from a time when being late could mean someone died. The building stood squat and official at the edge of the complex, concrete and small windows, the kind of structure designed for function over form. She pushed through the door into air conditioning that felt like winter after the humidity outside. Master Sergeant Cross sat at a desk reviewing paperwork. He glanced up when she entered. Lieutenant Ashford, right on time. Master Sergeant, she stood at parade rest, not required in this setting, but it gave her something to do with her hands, something to focus on besides the way he was looking at her, like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't quite balance. General Graves will be here shortly. Cross set down his pen. In the meantime, I have a request. Sergeant Osama, I'd like you to attempt the 1,000-yard lane. Silence. Kira felt her pulse quicken, not from fear, from recognition, from knowing that every step forward was a step closer to revelation. 1,000 yards was different. 1,000 yards was where amateurs fell apart and professionals proved themselves, where the wind became enemy and friend simultaneously, where gravity and rotation and a dozen other invisible forces collaborated to turn straight lines into curves. Any particular reason Master Sergeant Cross stood, walked around the desk until he was closer. Not crowding, just closing distance. When he spoke, his voice carried something new, Something that might have been respect, might have been suspicion, might have been both. Because 600 yards was clean, too clean, and I need to know if that was the ceiling or just the warm-up. And if I refuse, then you refuse. He shrugged. But the general is coming either way. And he's going to want to see what all the talk is about. Better to control the demonstration than have it demanded. Smart. He was giving her the illusion of choice while making clear there was only one real option. Kira had played this game before, in other contexts, with other people who thought they were being subtle while broadcasting their intentions like signal fires. Understood, Master Sergeant. When do we start? Now. They walked to the range together, side by side but not speaking. The silence comfortable for Cross, uncomfortable for Kira. She kept her eyes forward, kept her breathing steady, kept her hands loose at her sides instead of reaching for her forearm the way she wanted to, the way her body was screaming at her to, like checking for something that might have disappeared in the night. The 1,000-yard lane stretched out like an accusation. The target so distant it looked more like suggestion than reality, a dark smudge against brown earth. The kind of distance where atmospheric conditions mattered as much as skill, where temperature gradients bent bullets, where the Coriolis effect became measurable, where shooting stopped being mechanical and started being art. A small group had gathered: Sergeant Holloway, Corporal Beckett, a few other soldiers who had heard rumors and wanted to see for themselves. And one man Kira didn't recognize. Older, 50 maybe, infantry patch on his shoulder, combat infantry badge on his chest, the look of someone who had been places and done things and carried the weight of both. The stranger observed Kira's approach, his eyes sharp, evaluating. She felt his attention like physical pressure, like he was looking for something specific and trying to determine if she matched whatever criteria he held in his mind. Cross gestured to the rifle. Same weapon as yesterday. Scope is already zeroed for 1,000. Wind is 5 to 7 from the east. Temperature is 78 and climbing. Any questions? No, Master Sergeant. Kira moved to the bench. This time she didn't rush, didn't pretend confidence she wasn't sure she felt. She took her time, checked the weapon thoroughly, verified the zero, confirmed the ammunition, built the ritual that her father had taught her and Afghanistan had perfected, the ritual that turned chaos into order, uncertainty into action. She settled into position. The rifle felt heavier at this distance, not physically, but psychologically, because 1,000 yards was where mistakes became obvious, where small errors became big misses, where you couldn't hide behind luck or accident. You either had the skill or you didn't. Either the math worked or it failed. Either you were what you claimed or you were exposed as pretender. Kira closed her eyes, felt the wind. It whispered across her skin. Cool, consistent, not gusting. That was good. Gusts made everything unpredictable. But a steady wind was just another variable. Another number in the calculation. Another element to account for and adjust for and eventually master. She opened her eyes. Through the scope, the target appeared. Still distant, still difficult, but possible. Everything was possible if you understood the rules. If you accepted that the bullet didn't fly straight, that it dropped and curved and responded to forces you couldn't see but could measure, could predict, could compensate for with tiny adjustments that made all the difference. Her finger found the trigger, the familiar weight, the familiar resistance. She had fired this rifle yesterday, knew its particular character now, knew it liked pressure that built gradually, knew it broke cleanly if you respected it, knew it would reward patience and punish rush. She breathed, in, out, halfway, hold. Her heart beat once, twice, 3 times, between the third and fourth beat. In that space, that pause, that moment when the body hesitated between continuation and rest. She fired. The rifle punched back against her shoulder. The sound rolled across the range. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the distant target shuddered. A visible impact. Center mass. Perfect. Nobody spoke. The silence stretched like elastic, pulled taut, ready to snap. Corporal Beckett's mouth hung open, Sergeant Holloway stood frozen mid-gesture. Cross showed no expression, but his posture changed. Straightened, like someone who had suspected something and just had it confirmed. The stranger stepped forward. He moved with the careful deliberateness of someone controlling strong emotion. His eyes locked on Kira, then dropped to her arms, to her sleeves, to the fabric that covered what he couldn't quite see but was starting to suspect. Ma'am, his voice carried the rough texture of too many years and too many deserts. I have a question. Kira stood from the rifle, turned to face him. Staff Sergeant Garrett Morrison, retired. I was infantry. Multiple deployments, Afghanistan primarily. He paused, let that information settle. And I was in Kunar Valley, 2017, late spring. The world tilted slightly. Kira felt it. That sensation of reality shifting, of carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. She kept her face neutral, kept her voice steady, but inside everything was screaming to run, to leave, to get away before this moment became what it was threatening to become. I'm sure many soldiers served in Kunar Valley, Staff Sergeant Morrison. True, ma'am, but not many of them owe their lives to someone they never met. He took another step closer. His eyes dropped again to her arm. We were pinned down. My team, 6 of us, ambush on 3 sides, 2 men already hit, radio barely working. We thought that was it. Thought we were done. His voice thickened. Then someone started shooting. From somewhere we couldn't see, dropping targets at distances we didn't think were possible. One by one. Like someone was checking names off a list. Kira said nothing. Radio crackled. Voice said ghost in position. You are going to make it. Morrison's eyes glistened. And we did. All 6 of us made it. Because someone we never saw decided we were worth saving. The gathered soldiers were paying attention now. Really paying attention. Not with curiosity anymore. With something deeper. Something that bordered on awe. Because Morrison wasn't some kid telling stories. He was a veteran, a man with combat patches and scars and the kind of credibility that couldn't be faked. If he said something happened, it happened. That's a remarkable story, Staff Sergeant Morrison. It is, ma'am, and here's the thing. He gestured to her arm. We never knew who Ghost was. Never got a name. Never got confirmation. Just rumors. Just whispers about engagement distances. About shots that shouldn't have been possible. About 4 major operations where someone invisible saved American lives. Kira's hand moved instinctively to her forearm, covering it. Too late. Morrison had already seen, had already noticed the way she protected that spot, the way she touched it, the way it clearly meant something she wasn't ready to share. Those engagement distances became kind of famous in certain circles, ma'am. Among the people who were there, who witnessed what happened, we talked about them, memorized them, because they represented the moments we should have died but didn't. He recited them like prayer. 1,142 meters. First shot. The shot that changed everything. Kira's face remained stone. 1,247 meters. Second operation. Stopped a vehicle bomb. Staff Sergeant, I don't think. 983 meters. Convoy protection. 17 people saved. This is appropriate. And 1,356 meters. The classified one. The one nobody talks about, but everyone knows happened. Morrison stopped. Studied her. Really studied her. Ma'am, would you mind showing me that tattoo? The question landed like artillery. Kira stood very still, every muscle locked, every instinct screaming. This was the moment, the fulcrum, the point where 6 years of careful secrecy either held or shattered, where the person she had been and the person she was trying to be collided in front of witnesses who would remember everything. She could refuse, could pull rank, could walk away, could maintain the facade a little longer, could keep Ghost buried where Ghost belonged. In the past, in the classified files, in the memories of people who didn't know her face, or she could show them, could let the truth emerge, could own what she had done instead of hiding it, could stop pretending that ink on skin was just decoration, that numbers were just numbers, that the past was something you could leave behind simply by moving forward. Her hand moved to her sleeve, slowly, like lifting something heavy. She rolled the fabric up, exposing her forearm, exposing the tattoo. In the morning light, every detail visible. The crosshairs etched with perfect precision. The four numbers arranged in careful script. The dates, the coordinates, the record of 4 nights when death had reached across impossible distances and touched exactly who it was meant to touch. 1 142, 247, 983, 356. Morrison stared, his breath caught, his eyes went wide, his hand lifted halfway like he wanted to touch the ink, to confirm it was real, that this was actually happening, that he was standing in front of the person who had saved his life and never asked for recognition. "It's you," his voice barely above whisper. "Your ghost." The soldiers around them erupted, not loudly, but with that particular energy of people realizing they were witnessing something significant, something that would become story, legend. The kind of moment you told your grandchildren about when they asked what you did in the service. Corporal Beckett stepped back, hand over his mouth, eyes huge. Sergeant Holloway's face cycled through emotions too quickly to identify individually. Shock, disbelief, shame, respect. All of it crashing together in waves. Only Cross remained calm. He stood with his arms folded, observing, evaluating, his expression unreadable. But something in his posture suggested this wasn't complete surprise, suggested he had suspected, had known, had been waiting for this confirmation. Morrison's eyes filled. "Ma'am, I need to..." He stopped, tried again. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough." "It's plenty, Staff Sergeant." "No, ma'am, it's not. You gave me 6 more years with my kids. You gave me a wedding anniversary I never thought I'd see. You gave me a life I was about to lose." His voice cracked. "How do you thank someone for that?" Kira met his gaze, really met it. She saw it all. The gratitude, the emotion, the weight of carrying the survivor's guilt mixed with impossible debt. She had seen that look before, in other faces, other places. People whose lives had been spared by bullets they never saw coming, who walked away from ambushes they should have died in, who woke up every day knowing they were living on borrowed time that someone else had loaned them. You already have Staff Sergeant Morrison. By being here, by making those 6 years count. That's thanks enough. Movement at the edge of the range. Everyone turned. A vehicle approached. Black SUV, official. The kind that carried important people who didn't have time for walking. It stopped near the observation point. The rear door opened. General Winston Graves stepped out. 61 years old, but carrying it like 50. Tall, straight, gray hair cut military precise. 3 stars on his collar catching sunlight. Combat patches from Gulf War to Afghanistan covering his right shoulder. The look of a man who had done everything he was asking others to do and remembered exactly what it cost. Every soldier snapped to attention. Graves returned the salute casually. His eyes swept the assembled group, taking inventory, assessing. When his gaze landed on Kira, it stopped, lingered. Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe, or curiosity. Hard to tell from this distance. "As you were." His voice carried command naturally. "I understand we have something interesting happening this morning." Cross stepped forward. "Sir, Lieutenant Ashford has just completed a perfect shot at 1,000 yards. Staff Sergeant Morrison was providing context about the lieutenant's background." Context. Graves said the word like he was tasting it, testing its flavor. "That's an interesting choice of terminology, Master Sergeant Cross." He walked toward Kira, boots striking gravel with measured cadence, each step deliberate. The kind of approach that made you feel evaluated before any words were spoken. He stopped 6 feet away, professional distance, but close enough to see details, to study, to judge. His eyes dropped to her exposed forearm, to the tattoo. For 10 seconds he said nothing, just examined it, read the numbers, traced the crosshairs with his gaze, saw the dates and coordinates arranged like evidence, like proof, like a confession that couldn't be retracted once revealed. When he looked back up, his expression had changed. Gone was the casual curiosity, replaced with something harder, more focused. The look of a general who had just realized something important and was calculating implications at speed. Lieutenant Ashford. His voice dropped lower, more serious. Would you mind telling me where you acquired that tattoo? Afghanistan, sir, 6 years ago. And the numbers? Kira hesitated. One heartbeat, two, three, then chose truth over evasion. Chose owning her past over hiding it. Engagement distances, sir, 4 operations, classified contractor work. Before I commissioned. Graves's jaw tightened. He glanced at Cross, then at Morrison, then back to Kira, working through timelines, connecting information, remembering things that had been filed away in the category of interesting but unsolved mysteries. Ghost. He said the word quietly, like speaking a legend's name. Your ghost. Not a question. A statement. A confirmation of something he had suspected the moment he saw those numbers. Kira stood perfectly still. I was called that, yes, sir. I've been looking for ghosts for 6 years, Lieutenant. Graves stepped closer. Do you know why, sir? No, sir. Because in 2018, when I was a colonel, I reviewed classified reports from Afghanistan operations. Reports that mentioned an unregistered long-range asset who had saved multiple teams. Reports that recommended recognition, medals, public acknowledgement. He paused. But the CIA refused, said the asset's identity was classified for operational security, that revealing the person would compromise ongoing missions. He circled her slowly, not threatening, studying, the way a sculptor studies marble before deciding where to cut. I fought that decision, Lieutenant, argued that heroism deserves recognition, that saving American lives earns more than bureaucratic secrecy. I was overruled. He stopped in front of her again. But I never stopped looking, never stopped wondering who Ghost was, whether they were still alive, still serving, still out there somewhere. His eyes locked on hers. And now I find out Ghost has been here, at Fort Bragg, under my command. For how long? 14 months, sir. 14 months. He repeated it like an accusation, like discovering valuable equipment had been sitting in a closet unused. 14 months as a forward observer, filing paperwork, calculating coordinates, while the most effective long-range shooter I've ever heard of was hiding behind a desk. I wasn't hiding, sir. I was serving in the capacity I was assigned. Because you chose not to reveal your background. Because my background was classified, sir. Graves considered this, nodded slowly. Fair point. And if the CIA classified it, you had obligation to maintain that classification. He glanced at the gathered soldiers, at Morrison, at Holloway and Beckett and Cross. Though I suspect that classification just became significantly more difficult to maintain. Yes, sir. The general turned to address everyone. What you've witnessed this morning is classified, not officially, but by common sense. Lieutenant Ashford's background is her business. Her service record is exemplary. Her capabilities are now apparent. But what happened before she joined us is not for discussion outside this group. Are we clear? A chorus of yes, sir echoed across the range. Graves turned back to Kira. Lieutenant, I have a proposal. Sir, I want to see you shoot 1,200 yards. Moving target, real wind, real conditions. He gestured to the distant lane. If you can make that shot, I will personally recommend you for immediate entry into the advanced sniper course. Not as a student, as an instructor candidate. Silence crashed over the range. Instructor candidate, not just qualifying, not just proving competence, but teaching, mentoring, becoming part of the system that created the next generation of long-range shooters. It was recognition, validation, acceptance at the highest level. It was also exposure, complete, total, irreversible. Kira studied the distant target. 1,200 yards was brutal. Add movement, and it became nearly impossible. This wasn't just a test of skill. It was a test of nerve, of commitment, of whether she was willing to fully step into the light and own everything that came with it. Her father's voice echoed in memory. That hospital room, his last words. Whatever you become, be it completely. She met General Graves's eyes. When do we start, sir? The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but close. Now, Lieutenant, we start now. The walk to the 1,200-yard lane felt like crossing from one life into another. Behind her was 6 years of careful anonymity. Ahead was something new, something uncertain, something that would define her future in ways she couldn't predict. Cross walked beside him, silent until they were out of earshot from the others. I was in Kunar Valley too. His voice low, meant only for her. 2017, late May. My team was the first one you saved, the one at 1,142 meters. Kira stopped walking, turned to face him. He met her eyes without flinching. I heard your voice on the radio that night, telling us we'd make it, telling us to stay down, to trust you. He paused. I never forgot that voice, and this morning when you spoke to Morrison, I recognized it, knew exactly who you were. Why didn't you say anything? Because it wasn't my story to tell, Lieutenant. It was yours. You earned the right to reveal it when you were ready. He glanced at her tattoo. Those numbers, they're not just measurements, they're names. Every distance represents people who went home, who lived, who got to see their families again because you were good at something terrible. It was my job, Master Sergeant. No, he shook his head. Your job was the contract, the paycheck, the mission parameters. What you did went beyond job. You saved me, saved Morrison, saved dozens of others. That's not job, that's calling, that's purpose. He extended his hand. Kira shook it, his grip firm, respectful, the handshake of equals, of people who had been to the same dark places and found their way back different than they left. Whatever happens out there at 1,200 yards, Cross said, know that you already proved everything that matters. To me, to Morrison, to everyone who made it home because of you. Thank you, Master Sergeant. Thank you, Ghost. They reached the final lane. The target sat at the absolute edge of what was visible. Movement was simulated by a mechanical system that shifted the silhouette erratically. Left, right, stop, move. No pattern. Just chaos meant to mimic combat conditions where enemies didn't cooperate by standing still. General Graves was already there, waiting. When Kira approached, he gestured to the rifle. Same weapon, same zero. Wind is now 8 to 10 from the east with gusts to 15. Temperature is 82. Target moves on 5-second intervals. You'll have maybe 2 seconds to identify position and fire. This is not a forgiving exercise, Lieutenant. I understand, sir. One shot, that's all I need to see. Success means I make the call to advance course today. Miss means we revisit this conversation after you complete standard qualification cycle. Fair, more than fair. He was giving her one chance to prove this wasn't luck. Wasn't accident, was repeatable excellence that could be trusted in conditions that broke most shooters. Kira moved to the bench. She built her ritual again. Check weapon, verify ammunition, feel the wind, read the mirage, calculate the dozens of variables that turned a bullet's path from theory into reality. Behind her, soldiers had gathered. Word had spread. 20, 30, more arriving every minute, drawn by rumor and curiosity and the chance to witness something that might become legend. They stood in silence, observing, waiting. Kira settled behind the rifle. Through the scope, she found the target. It moved, disappeared, reappeared in a new position, moved again. The pattern was chaos, pure randomness designed to defeat prediction. You couldn't anticipate, could only react, could only wait for the moment when position and wind and calculation aligned into that brief window where impossible became achievable. She breathed, slowed her heart, slowed time itself through the alchemy of focus that turned seconds into hours and gave you space to think inside moments too brief for thought. The target appeared, stopped. 2 seconds. She saw it all at once. Distance, wind, drop, drift, movement prediction. The target would shift again in 1.7 seconds. Her bullet would take approximately 1.8 to arrive. That meant leading, shooting where the target would be instead of where it was. Her finger touched the trigger. Pressure built. She fired. The rifle roared. The bullet left the barrel at 3,000 feet per second. It climbed slightly, reached apex, began descent. The wind caught it, pushed it east. Gravity pulled down. Earth's rotation added drift. 100 variables acting simultaneously on copper and lead flying through space toward a target that was already moving to somewhere else. Time stretched. 1 second. 2. The target shifted. The bullet arrived. Metal struck metal with a sound like a bell. Perfect hit. Center mass. On a moving target. At 1,200 yards. In wind. The range exploded, not literally, but the noise, the cheering, the shouts. Soldiers who had observed in silence erupted into celebration like they had personally accomplished something impossible. Men hugged each other. Holloway stood with his hands on his head. Beckett was literally jumping. Morrison had his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. Only Cross and Graves remained still. Cross nodded slowly, satisfied, like witnessing a theorem prove itself, like seeing something he had suspected become undeniable. Graves walked to Kira. He didn't smile, didn't congratulate, just extended his hand. She shook it. The handshake of professionals, of people who understood what they had witnessed was more than sport, more than skill. It was craft practiced at the highest level. It was mastery. "Welcome to the advanced course, Lieutenant Ashford." His voice carried over the dying celebration. "You report Monday, 0600. Master Sergeant Cross will be your evaluator." "Thank you, sir." Graves leaned closer, voice dropping so only she could hear. 6 years ago, I couldn't give Ghost the recognition she deserved. But I can give Lieutenant Ashford the opportunity she's earned. Don't waste it." "I won't, sir." He stepped back, saluted. She returned it. He climbed into his vehicle and was gone, leaving Kira standing on the range surrounded by soldiers who now knew exactly who she was, what she had done, what those numbers on her arm meant. There was no hiding anymore, no pretending, no careful anonymity. Ghost was dead. Lieutenant Kira Ashford was exposed. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the anxiety and the fear, and the uncertainty about what came next, and she felt something else. Relief, the relief of no longer carrying secrets alone, of being seen, of stepping fully into the truth of who she was instead of the comfortable lie of who she pretended to be. Morrison approached, held out his hand. "Permission to buy you a drink sometime, ma'am? I owe you about 1,000. She laughed, actually laughed, the first genuine laughter in longer than she could remember. "One's enough, Staff Sergeant. One's plenty." The sun climbed higher, the heat pressed down, and for the first time in 6 years, Kira Ashford walked across Fort Bragg without touching her forearm, without checking that the secret was still hidden, without carrying the weight of a past she couldn't acknowledge. Because the past wasn't secret anymore. It was proof, evidence, legacy. And in General Graves's office, 3 miles away, he sat at his desk and opened a file he had kept for 6 years. A file marked classified, a file containing reports about Ghost, about 4 operations, about distances that seemed impossible until someone made them real. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number he had called a dozen times over the years. "This is General Graves. I need to speak with someone about Operation Canard Valley, about the asset codenamed Ghost." He paused, studied the window toward where the range sat in the distance. "I found her, and we need to talk about what comes next." He hung up, leaned back in his chair, and smiled. Because sometimes secrets buried didn't stay buried. Sometimes the truth clawed its way back to the surface. Sometimes the person you were looking for was right in front of you all along. And sometimes, just sometimes, the story was only beginning. The call came at 0530 the next morning. Kira's phone buzzed on the nightstand. Too early for routine, too precise for accident. She was already awake, had been awake since 0400, lying in the dark, thinking about yesterday, about 1,200 yards, about secrets that weren't secret anymore, about a life that had shifted while she was busy trying to hold it still. She picked up. "Lieutenant Ashford, this is General Graves. I need you in my office at 0700. Dress uniform. This is not optional." Click. No explanation, no context, just command and expectation. The kind of call that made your stomach drop because you knew something significant was coming, but had no idea whether it would be good or catastrophic. Kira showered in water that felt colder than it was, dressed with the mechanical precision of someone who had done this 10,000 times. Army service uniform, pressed sharp, shoes polished mirror bright, ribbons aligned perfectly, hair regulation tight, the armor of military conformity. Looking the part even when you didn't know what part you were about to play. She arrived at headquarters at 06:45. Early, always early. The building stood imposing in morning light. Red brick and white columns, the weight of institutional authority made physical. She climbed the steps, showed ID to the desk sergeant, was directed to the second floor, to an office at the end of a hall that seemed longer than it should have been. The door was open. General Graves sat behind his desk. Master Sergeant Cross stood to one side, and in two chairs facing the desk sat people Kira didn't recognize. A man in civilian clothes, expensive suit, the kind that said government but didn't specify which part. A woman in Air Force blues. Colonel rank, intelligence patch, the look of someone who dealt in secrets professionally. Lieutenant Ashford, come in, close the door. She did, stood at attention, waited for whatever this was to begin. Graves gestured to an empty chair. Sit. She sat. The suited man spoke first. His voice carried that particular smoothness of career bureaucrats who had learned to say everything while revealing nothing. Lieutenant Ashford, I'm Jonathan Reed. I work for the Central Intelligence Agency. Specifically, I work in the Special Activities Division, the division that employed you 6 years ago under contract. He opened a folder. Inside were photos, documents, reports, all marked with classification stamps, all detailing operations that officially never happened, all describing work performed by an asset codenamed Ghost. When you left our employment in 2017, we classified your identity, your work, your very existence in our files. This was done to protect you, to protect our methods, to maintain operational security on ongoing missions. Reed looked up. That classification remains in effect, technically. Technically, Colonel Martinez from Air Force Intelligence leaned forward. But practically, your identity is now known to approximately 40 service members at Fort Bragg. Word is spreading. By end of week, half the base will know. By end of month, the story will be on military forums, Reddit, Facebook groups. The classification is effectively compromised. Kira felt her chest tighten. Am I in trouble? No. Graves's voice cut through, firm, definitive. You maintained operational security as long as was feasible. You revealed nothing voluntarily. When pressed, you gave minimal information. The compromise happened organically, through observation and deduction by trained military personnel. There's no fault here. Reed nodded agreement. The general is correct. However, we now have a situation that requires management. Your identity is known, your capabilities are documented, your background is becoming public knowledge within military circles. He closed the folder. We need to decide how to handle this, and more importantly, how to use it. Use it. Kira's voice came out harder than intended. I'm not an asset anymore. No, you're something potentially more valuable. Martinez pulled out a different folder. This one had photos of young soldiers, men and women, various ages, various specialties. The military is expanding long-range precision programs, sniper schools, designated marksman courses, counter-sniper units. We're investing billions into technology, optics, ballistics, training infrastructure. She pushed the folder across the desk to Kira. But technology is worthless without people who know how to use it, without instructors who can teach not just mechanics, but mindset, not just technique, but judgment. We need people who have done the work in conditions where failure meant death. Reed picked up the thread. You represent something we can't manufacture. Combat-proven expertise, real-world experience at the highest level, and more importantly, proof that excellence in this field isn't limited by traditional demographics. He paused. There are talented female shooters being discouraged from pursuing sniper specialties, being told they don't fit the profile, don't have what it takes. Your existence disproves that instantly. Kira examined the photos, young faces, eager, uncertain, looking for guidance from people who had walked the path before them. One photo caught her eye, a young woman, infantry tab, The determined look of someone who knew what she wanted but didn't know if she'd be allowed to have it. What exactly are you asking me to do? Graves leaned forward. I'm offering you a position as advanced sniper course instructor, not assistant, full instructor. You would help develop curriculum, train students, evaluate performance, and serve as proof that this specialty is open to anyone with the skill and commitment to excel. This isn't charity, Lieutenant. Martinez's voice carried steel. We're not offering this because you're a woman or because of some diversity initiative. We're offering because you're legitimately the most qualified person available. Your record speaks for itself. 4 major operations, 0 failures, dozens of lives saved. That's the resume we need teaching the next generation. Reed stood, walked to the window, studied the base below. If you accept, the CIA will officially declassify your work, not the details, not the specific operations, but your identity, your role, your general contributions. This will open you to recognition, awards, public acknowledgement. He turned back. It will also open you to scrutiny, questions, media attention, potentially. Every decision you made will be analyzed. Every shot will be debated. You'll go from invisible to very visible very quickly. And if I decline, then you remain a forward observer. Continue your current assignment. We reclassify your background as much as possible. Issue denials if pressed. Let the story fade into rumor and speculation. Graves's expression was unreadable. No one would blame you. Privacy is valuable. Anonymity is comfortable. There's no shame in choosing it. Silence filled the office. Heavy, weighted with implications. Kira studied the photos again. At those young faces, at the hope and uncertainty they carried, her father's final words echoed in memory, about being something completely instead of halfway, about using gifts for purpose instead of hiding them for comfort. Staff Sergeant Morrison's gratitude. 6 years he got to live because she had been good at something terrible. All the future Morrisons, all the soldiers who would face ambushes, who would need someone making shots that saved lives, who deserved training from people who understood that shooting wasn't sport. It was life and death. Her hand moved to her forearm, to the tattoo, to the numbers that represented more than distance. That represented names, families, futures. She met General Graves' eyes. I accept. Something changed in the room, like pressure releasing, like a decision that everyone hoped for but nobody could force becoming real through her choice. Graves nodded. Martinez smiled. Reed's shoulders relaxed slightly. Cross, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. Lieutenant, I'll be your supervising instructor for the first 6 months. After that, you'll operate independently. His voice carried respect. This won't be easy. Students will test you, some because they doubt, some because they need to know you're legitimate. You'll face questions, challenges, moments that make you want to quit. I understand, Master Sergeant. I don't think you do, not fully. He moved closer. When I teach, I'm teaching from experience, combat experience. Everyone knows it, respects it. When you teach, some students will see you as female first, as instructor second. They'll wonder if standards were lowered, if politics played a role, if you're really qualified or just diversity higher. Kira held his gaze. Then I'll prove them wrong, the same way I proved Sergeant Holloway wrong, the same way I've been proving people wrong my entire life. Cross smiled, actually smiled. Good answer, Lieutenant. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Graves stood, extended his hand across the desk. Welcome to the instructor, Cadre Lieutenant Ashford. You report Monday morning, 0600. Until then, you're on administrative leave. Use the time to prepare, mentally, emotionally, because Monday, your life changes completely. She shook his hand. Yes, sir. Reed and Martinez left, taking their folders and their classifications and their bureaucratic concerns with them. Cross followed, leaving Kira alone with General Graves. He gestured to the chair. She sat again. Off the record, Lieutenant. His voice softened slightly, became more human, less command. I've been in this uniform for 38 years, seen a lot, done more, and I've learned that the best warriors are rarely the loudest, rarely the ones seeking attention. They're the ones doing the work quietly, effectively. without need for recognition. He pulled open a drawer, removed a small box, set it on the desk between them. You were that kind of warrior. Ghost was that kind of asset. Anonymous, effective, selfless. He opened the box. Inside was a medal, bronze, beautiful in its simplicity. This is my combat infantry badge from 1991, Gulf War. I earned it in conditions that seemed hard at the time but look easy compared to what you faced. He pushed the box toward her. I can't give you the medals you actually earned. Can't retroactively award Valor for classified operations. But I can give you this, not as replacement, as acknowledgement, from one soldier who's been in the dark to another. Kira stared at the medal. Sir, I can't accept this. You already have lieutenant, because I'm your commanding officer and I just gave you a gift. Refusing would be awkward. The corner of his mouth lifted. Besides, you'll pass it forward someday to someone who earns it from you. That's how these things work. That's how legacy perpetuates. She picked up the box, felt the weight of it, the weight of history, of recognition, of being seen not just for what you could do, but for what you had done. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ghost. The weekend passed in strange suspension. Saturday afternoon, Kira drove to Montana, to the ridge where her father had taught her. The land looked the same, mountains in the distance, grass rippling in wind that never stopped. Sky so big, it made you feel small and significant simultaneously. She stood where he had stood, held an imaginary rifle the way he had taught her, felt his presence like a hand on her shoulder. I hope I'm doing this right, Dad, the wind whispered. Non-committal, offering no answers, just the steady presence that had always been enough. She drove back Sunday night, slept poorly, woke before her alarm, dressed in combat uniform now instead of dress blues, instructor tabs sewn on her shoulder, the small patch that meant everything. That meant authority, expertise, responsibility. Fort Bragg at 0530 looked different somehow, like she was seeing it for the first time, or maybe seeing it clearly for the first time. The sniper range sat quiet, waiting. She arrived alone, walked the lanes, touched the benches, stood where students would stand, studied downrange targets that represented more than paper, that represented capability, lethality, the difference between mission success and failure, between someone going home and someone not. Footsteps on gravel. Master Sergeant Cross approached, carrying 2 thermoses. He handed her one. Coffee, black, figured you might need it. Thank you, Master Sergeant. They stood together, watching the sunrise, watching light spill across the range, painting everything gold and shadow, making the familiar look mythic, important, worth the attention being paid to it. Nervous, Cross asked. Terrified. Good. Means you care, means you understand the weight. He sipped his coffee. When I started teaching, I thought it was about showing them how to shoot, how to calculate, how to compensate for variables. Took me 2 years to realize that's only 30% of the job. What's the other 70? Teaching them why precision matters, why patience beats speed, why excellency is non-negotiable when lives depend on your competence. He studied her. You know, wives say, you've lived it. That's what makes you dangerous as an instructor. You're not teaching theory, you're teaching truth. A vehicle pulled up, then another, then more. Students arriving, 15 of them. Mixture of ranks, specialties, backgrounds, all here for the same reason, to become better. To learn from people who knew what better looked like in conditions where better meant survival. They assembled, saw Kira standing with Cross. Some faces showed surprise. Some showed skepticism. A few showed something that might have been respect. Most showed nothing. Carefully neutral. Waiting to see who this person was before deciding how to react. Cross stepped forward. Good morning, I'm Master Sergeant Dalton Cross. This is Lieutenant Kira Ashford. We'll be your primary instructors for Advanced Sniper Course. Next 8 weeks, you belong to us. We will push you, test you, break you down, and rebuild you into something better than what walked onto this range today. He gestured to Kira. Lieutenant Ashford has combat experience, has made shots under conditions most of you can't imagine, has proven herself at distances and difficulties that separate amateurs from professionals. You will treat her with the same respect you show me. You will listen when she speaks. You will learn what she teaches. Clear, a chorus of "Yes, Master Sergeant" echoed across the range. But Kira saw it. The doubt, the questions, the sideways glances between students that said they weren't sure about this, weren't convinced, needed proof before they bought in. That was fine. She had spent her entire life providing proof. Lieutenant Ashford, cross-step, take them through fundamentals assessment. Kira moved forward. 15 sets of eyes tracked her, evaluating, judging, waiting for her to prove or fail. She felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure, like standing on a stage with spotlights that revealed every flaw, every uncertainty, every reason to doubt. Morrison's tears. 6 years he got to live. When she spoke, her voice carried clear across the range. My name is Lieutenant Ashford. Before I was your instructor, I was a contractor. Codenamed Ghost. I operated in Afghanistan. Made shots between 983 and 1,356 meters. Saved 47 American lives across 4 major operations. Every number on my arm represents a distance where someone lived instead of died. She rolled up her sleeve, showed them the tattoo, let them see the proof. I'm not here to prove I belong. I've already done that. In places where failure meant body bags. I'm here to teach you to belong. To teach you that shooting at distance isn't about technology. It's about discipline, patience, judgment, and the absolute refusal to accept anything less than perfect, because perfect is the only standard that keeps people alive. She pointed downrange. You have 8 weeks. Some of you will pass, some won't. But everyone will leave better than they arrived, because I will teach you what works, what doesn't, what saves lives and what costs them. And I will hold you to the same standard I held myself when it mattered. Silence. Then one student stepped forward, a corporal, young, maybe 25. He came to attention. Ma'am, permission to speak? Granted. I was in Kunar Valley, 2017. I was with staff, Sergeant Morrison's team. You saved my life. His voice cracked slightly. I'm honored to learn from you. Kira nodded. Then let's make sure you can save someone else's life, Corporal. Get on the line. They trained, morning turned to afternoon turned to evening. Kira taught the way her father had taught her, with patience, with precision, with the understanding that every detail mattered because details were the difference between hitting and missing, between living and dying, between going home and not. Some students struggled. She helped them, adjusted their form, corrected their breathing, showed them what right looked like, and helped them find it in themselves. Some students excelled. She pushed them harder, gave them more difficult shots, more challenging conditions, showed them that good wasn't good enough, that excellence was the baseline and mastery was the goal. One student in particular caught her attention. Corporal Jessica Torres, infantry background, good instincts but rough technique, the kind of raw talent that needed shaping. Kira made a mental note. This one would go far if given the right guidance. All of them learned. By the end of day 1, the doubt was fading, replaced by respect, by recognition that this woman knew what she was talking about, had done what she claimed, could teach them things worth learning. Cross observed from the observation point. He saw Kira work, saw her move between students, confident, competent, natural. Like teaching was something she had always done even though he knew this was her first day. Some people were born for certain roles, born to stand in front of others and show the way, born to pass down knowledge that mattered. She was one of them. 3 weeks and something happened. Kira was demonstrating wind reading, explaining how mirage revealed what instruments couldn't measure, how heat shimmer told stories if you knew the language. She had a student behind the rifle, talking him through calculations, through the process of seeing what couldn't be seen. The shot fired, perfect hit at 800 yards. The student stood, turned to her, eyes wide. Ma'am, I've never made that shot before. You just did. But how, what changed? Kira smiled. You did. You stopped forcing it, started trusting process, started believing you could do it. She gestured downrange. Shooting at distance is 90% mental, 10% mechanical. Once you master the mechanics, it's all about mind, about confidence, about trusting your training and executing without doubt. The student nodded, sat back down, made the shot again and again, each time building confidence, each time proving to himself that it wasn't luck, wasn't accident, was skill he possessed. Had always possessed, just needed someone to show him how to access it. That night, Cross found Kira in the instructor office, reviewing scores, planning next day's lessons, doing the work that teaching required beyond the actual teaching. He sat across from her. "You're a natural." "Thank you, Master Sergeant." "I mean it. I've trained instructors for 15 years. Most take months to develop presence. Command, the ability to make students trust them enough to really learn. You had it day one." He leaned back. "You know why boys? Because you're not teaching them to be you. You're teaching them to be their best version of themselves. That's the difference between good instructors and great ones. Good ones create copies. Great ones create individuals." Kira considered this. "My father taught me that. He said everyone shoots differently, has different strengths, different challenges. The teacher's job isn't to make everyone the same. It's to help each person find their particular excellence." Smart man. The best. Cross stood, walked to a cabinet, pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a rifle scope, vintage, old, worn from use but maintained with reverence. The kind of equipment that had history, that had been places, that had seen things worth remembering. "This belonged to my instructor, Master Sergeant William Hayes. He taught in 1990, taught me everything I know about shooting and most of what I know about teaching." Cross held it carefully, like holding something sacred. "When I earned my instructor tab, he gave me this, told me it was tradition, that instructors pass equipment forward to instructors they train. That legacy moves through objects we touch." He handed it to Kira. "You've earned this, not just as instructor, as person who understands what this job means, what responsibility we carry, what difference we make in lives we'll never meet." Kira took the scope, felt the weight, the history, the connection to lineage she was now part of. "Master Sergeant, I can't." "You can, you will, and someday you'll pass it to someone you train. Someone who becomes instructor, who carries this forward into a future we won't see. That's how legacy works. That's how traditions survive, through people willing to honor them by accepting responsibility." He moved toward the door, stopped, looked back. "One more thing. You're not inheriting my legacy, Lieutenant. You're creating your own. First female sniper instructor at Fort Bragg. First combat-proven contractor to join the regular Army instructor cadre. First person to break barriers that needed breaking. That's yours. Own it." He left Kira alone with the scope, with the weight of it, the responsibility, the future it represented. She sat there long after he left, holding it, feeling the connection to people she'd never met, to Hayes who taught Cross, to whoever taught Hayes, to the lineage stretching back to the first person who understood that teaching mattered as much as doing, that passing knowledge forward was how communities survived, how standards maintained, how excellence perpetuated across generations. 8 months later, graduation ceremony. 15 students started, 13 finished, 2 dropped. Not from inability, from recognition that this wasn't their path, that their skills lay elsewhere. That was fine. Better to know before lives depended on competence you didn't possess. The 13 who remained stood in formation. Dress uniforms, new tabs on their shoulders, certificates in hand, families watching, pride visible on faces. The earned pride of people who had done something difficult and succeeded. General Graves spoke, gave standard remarks about dedication and service and the importance of precision in modern warfare, about the investment the Army made in them, about the expectations that came with their new qualifications. Standard stuff. Then he paused, studied Kira. "This course represents something new, not just in curriculum, in composition. For the first time, we had an instructor whose experience was earned outside traditional channels. who proved that excellence in this field isn't limited by demographics, who showed our students that capability matters more than assumptions. He gestured to her. Lieutenant Ashford, would you say a few words? Kira stepped forward, faced the graduates, faced their families, faced the assembled officers and instructors and people who would remember this moment. 8 months ago, I stood on this range and told you I was here to teach, not to prove I belonged, because I'd already proven that in places where proof was measured in lives saved. She paused. But you proved something to me, too. You proved that students who come willing to learn can master anything, can become excellent at something that seems impossible at first, can develop skills that save lives. She met each graduate's eyes. You're going to deploy, going to face real situations, real enemies, real consequences. When that happens, remember what you learned here. Remember that patience beats speed, that precision beats volume, that one perfect shot is worth 100 near misses. Remember that people are counting on you, people whose names you don't know, whose faces you'll never see, but whose lives you might save by being excellent when it matters. She stepped back. The graduates saluted. She returned it. The ceremony concluded. Families rushed forward, hugs and congratulations and photos. The celebration of accomplishment, of making it through something hard, of earning something worth earning. 3 days after graduation, a package arrived. Official, Federal Courier. Kira signed for it in her office. Inside was a single document, CIA letterhead, declassification approval, signed by Reed, countersigned by Martinez, stamped with official seals that made it real, made it permanent. Her identity as Ghost was now public record, not the details, not the classified operations, but her name, her role, her contribution. 47 lives saved, 4 major operations. Recognition that had been denied for 6 years was now official. A note was paper-clipped to the document. Reed's handwriting. You earned this 6 years ago. Better late than never. Your country thanks you. J.R. Kira filed it carefully, not because it mattered for her career, but because it closed a circle, ended a chapter. Let Ghost rest while Lieutenant Ashford moved forward without carrying that weight in silence. The past was acknowledged. The future was open. That was enough. Cross appeared at her office door later that afternoon. Saw the courier. Good news. Closure mostly. He nodded understanding. They stood together in comfortable silence. Two people who had been to dark places and found their way back. Who understood that some things didn't need explaining. Just acknowledging. You know what the best part of teaching is? Cross asked. What? Knowing that your influence extends beyond who you directly touch. Every student you train will train others, officially or unofficially. They'll pass down what you taught. Will correct form the way you corrected theirs. Will emphasize fundamentals the way you emphasize them. Your voice will echo through hundreds of soldiers you'll never meet. That's legacy. That's immortality of a sort. Kira smiled. Yeah, I understand. 10 years passed like pages turning. Kira rose to captain, then major, became senior instructor, developed new curriculum, wrote doctrine, trained instructors who trained students who went downrange and came back with stories about shots they made and lives they saved. She never stopped teaching, never stopped honoring the responsibility that came with capability, never stopped being excellent at something that mattered. Her tattoo became famous in military circles. Other instructors got similar tattoos, recording their distances, their moments, their proof. It became tradition, badge of honor, connection to community that understood what those numbers meant. Cross retired at 62, gave a speech about legacy, about passing torches, about being proud of what he'd built. Kira stood in the audience, applauded, felt the weight of his absence before he even left, but also felt gratitude for believing in her, for giving her chance, for being mentor who saw potential instead of limitations. He approached her after. It's yours now, the program, the students, the future. I'm trusting you with what I built. Don't screw it up. She hugged him. First time, only time. I won't, I promise. I know you won't. That's why I'm leaving. He left, drove away from Fort Bragg, from the range, from the work that had defined him, leaving it in hands he trusted. Another 7 years passed. Kira stood in front of a memorial and new with boy names added, instructors who had served, who had taught, who had passed. She found Cross's name, engraved in stone, with dates, with accomplishments, with simple words. Master Sergeant Dalton Cross, 1966 to 2039. Teacher of 49. Builder of legacy. She placed her hand on the cold granite. Thank you, old friend, for seeing me, for believing, for showing me that teaching was the final mission, the most important one. Footsteps behind her. She turned. A young woman, 24, 25 maybe. Corporal rank, infantry tab, a Torres, the same Torres from her first class. Now worn by deployment, hardened by experience, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who had been tested and not found wanting. Major Ashford. Corporal Torres, it's been a while. 3 years, ma'am. 2 deployments. Torres stood straighter. I made 17 confirmed kills, saved a convoy in Helmand, used everything you taught me. Pride swelled in Kira's chest. I'm glad to hear it, Torres. That's actually why I'm here, ma'am. Torres took a breath. I want to try for instructor qualification. I know I don't have as much experience as most candidates, but I can teach. I want to teach, and I think I have something to offer. Kira studied her, saw herself 15 years ago, standing on a range, asking for chance, facing doubt, carrying capability nobody recognized, but also saw something different. Someone who had already proven herself, who had earned respect through action, who wasn't asking permission to be excellent, was asking permission to share that excellence with others. What made you decide this? You did, ma'am. Torres met her eyes. You showed me that being good at something means nothing if you keep it to yourself. That the real measure of a warrior is who they help create. I want to do that. Want to give someone else what you gave me. Kira smiled. Report Monday, 0600. Master Sergeant Rodriguez will evaluate your fundamentals. If you're as good as I think you are, we'll start your instructor training immediately. Torres's face lit up. Really, ma'am? Really? But Torres, ma'am, this isn't about you anymore. It's about everyone you're going to teach. Everyone they're going to teach. Every life that gets saved because someone learned from you. That's the weight. Can you carry it? Torres straightened. Yes, ma'am, I can. Then let's begin. That evening, Kira sat in her office, opened her desk, pulled out the scope Cross had given her 17 years ago. She held it, remembered the moment, the weight of receiving it, the responsibility it represented. Tomorrow she would start the process of giving it to someone. Not Torres, not yet, but soon. When Torres earned her instructor tab, when she proved herself not just as shooter, but as teacher, when she demonstrated the combination of skill and character that defined great instructors. That's when the scope would pass forward. That's when legacy would continue through new hands. That's when the cycle would complete and begin again. Kira studied the photo on her wall. Her father, young, standing on that Montana ridge, holding a rifle, smiling at camera, looking proud of something he hadn't even taught yet, but somehow knew he would. I did it, Dad. I became it completely, and I'm passing it forward, just like you taught me. The office fell quiet. Outside, the range sat empty, waiting for tomorrow, for new students, for new challenges, for new stories that would become legends, that would inspire others who would create their own legends. The sun set over Fort Bragg, painting the sky red and gold, making everything look mythic, important, worth the attention, worth the sacrifice, worth the commitment to excellence that defined people who chose to be instructors, who chose to give themselves to shaping others, who chose legacy over ego, teaching over glory, passing forward over holding tight. Kira turned off her light, locked her office, walked across the base, past ranges where tomorrow she would teach, past classrooms where students would learn, past memorial walls where names of great instructors waited to remind future generations what excellence looked like in flesh and blood and dedication. She touched her forearm, felt the tattoo through fabric, the numbers that once defined her, that once were secret, That now represented not just her past, but her bridge to helping others create their futures. 142, 1 247, 983, 1 356, four distances, four moments. Four reasons why she was qualified to teach people how to save lives by being excellent at something difficult. Four pieces of a legacy that had grown beyond her. That now included Torres and every other student she'd trained, and every student they would train, and every life that would be saved by people she would never meet, doing work she helped prepare them for. That was legacy, not bronze and marble, not ceremonies and speeches, not recognition and awards. Legacy was influence that echoed through time, through people willing to learn and teach, through standards maintained, through excellence perpetuated, through the simple decision to be great at something important and then show others how. Kira Ashford walked into the night. No longer ghost, no longer just lieutenant or captain or major, instructor, teacher, mentor, builder of the people who would build the future. And that was enough, more than enough. That was everything.